This past month has been a difficult one for our nation, really this whole year. Something as huge as the coronavirus was seemingly overshadowed by riots and racial tension like we haven't seen in decades. And as the weeks passed, I began to have many great conversations with people about race, some conversations that weren't so great. But it was around this time that I found out that I was going to be preaching here, and the Lord laid Psalm 19 on my heart. And so I began to pray, Lord, will you reveal to me the hidden sins of my heart? Well, this is not the video that I planned on making as the comeback to YouTube. It seems like whenever I make a video like talking about some upcoming projects that I have going on, then I disappear from YouTube for like several months. And I think the last video I actually said this. I've got an exciting week for this channel coming up next week, putting out hopefully 4 videos next week. Guess I was wrong about that one, but the point of this video is not to talk about where I've been for the last few months. That video is coming soon, hopefully. But in case you've been living under a rock, then you know that yesterday, January 6th, the Capitol building was stormed. It seems like we're on the brink of Civil War 2.0. And I wasn't sure if I should make this video or not, but after seeing so many of the vitriolic responses to what happened yesterday, I decided that I wanted to make this hopefully quick video to say that I think one of the biggest reasons that we as a nation keep finding ourselves in this cycle of being appalled at the news and then wondering how we got in this situation is because it's like we as a nation don't know how to say this short little phrase, I was wrong. We as a nation, we suffer from a virus, and I'm not talking about the virus of the coronavirus or the virus of racism, but specifically this virus called pride. And before you click off this video and be like, okay, this pastor is just talking about sin and all that stuff again, I think we can all agree that there's something that keeps us as Americans, whether we're on the right, whether we're on the left, whether we're in the middle, from simply saying that we're wrong. Listen, I've been wrong tons of times over this past year, okay? I thought this virus was gonna be over by Easter. I thought the Browns were gonna go 12-4, and then they went 11-5, which I'm not complaining about that one. Well, but seriously, I've been wrong about tons of things in these difficult conversations that we've been having. For example, last year, after George Floyd was killed, I posted in sort of an emotional response online. I said something like, if you're being silent on these issues, then your silence is speaking volumes. In other words, I wanted those who weren't talking about this online to at least acknowledge the wrong that was witnessed in that video. Well, I later found out that there were tons of people that were having far more healthier conversations offline than online, which is always something better to do. It's better to have an actual discussion with somebody than to just simply post a black box saying that you're against racism. I was also wrong in posting that because I realized that many of the people who later posted something probably should have stayed silent, right? I've been wrong tons of times over this past year, but what happens is when we as people and as a nation fail to admit when we're wrong, then what happens is we get louder and louder defending our wrong positions, and hostility increases and conspiracies get louder and louder, and eventually it boils over, and that's what we saw happen yesterday at the Capitol building. See, I could make a video about the dangers of Christians and conspiracies. You can go read Isaiah chapter 8, verse 12. I could make a video highlighting the differences in what happened yesterday at the Capitol versus what happened over the summer and those riots that broke out there, of which I do believe there are many differences. I could make a video highlighting the differences in how the police responded to the protesters yesterday at the Capitol versus how they responded to those who were actually protesting peacefully over the summer. I could make a video about how those who were raising up crosses and waving flags with the word Jesus on it were acting in ways that were completely antithetical to the ways of Jesus. Right? Those are all valid points. And in case you think I'm jumping on to the hate everyone from yesterday train, I could also make a video about the hypocrisy and how the media treated the extremists from yesterday and how they treated the extremists from over the summer. But I think the underlying issue that leads to situations like the ones we saw yesterday, it's not an issue just about race, it's not an issue just about the media, but it's about a lack of humility, specifically from those who call themselves Christians. See, like I said about the riots over the summer, I fully expect this attitude from people who are not Christians. Right? Martin Luther King said, and I quoted this in that video over the summer too, Martin Luther King said that riots are the language of the unheard. And so instead of jumping on the hate train towards people, I'm trying to listen and to understand, but church, and I'm talking specifically to those who call themselves Christians right now, while this attitude of anger and contempt towards perceived injustice is to be completely expected from those outside of the church, for those of us who are Christians, now is the time to model humility. See, why is it that we inside of the church look no different in our divisions and our divisiveness than those who are outside of the church? Well, let me give you just one test that you can give yourselves to see if your attitude is right when it comes to what happened yesterday or really what's been happening over the last several years. And here it is, one test. If you're a Christian, if you're someone who calls yourself a Christian, pray and ask God to show you your blind spots. I don't mean pray and ask God to show other people their blind spots. I don't mean you say, God, I'm pretty sure I'm right here. Show me if I'm wrong. No, I'm saying whether you're bashing the people from yesterday or whether you wish that you were right alongside with them in spirit, pray and ask God to show you areas in your life and in thought where you're wrong. And listen, when he does that, then comes the time when you need to decide, am I going to hang on to these wrong thoughts and attitudes that I've been having? Or am I, by the grace of God, gonna learn to say the 3 hardest words for anyone who's an American to say, I was wrong. I know statistically when I end a video with a sermon clip, people click off, but don't end this video just yet. Just for the next 3.5 minutes, just watch this sermon clip from a sermon I preached over the summer in June. And so I began to pray, Lord, will you reveal to me the hidden sins of my heart? And he did, and it wasn't fun. See, I realized first and foremost that while I had been praying for the family of George Floyd, not once had I prayed for the families of the officers and their families who had also been affected. I realized also, or better yet, found myself asking, am I just as heartbroken by the systemic racism in our country and the sin of the denial of it as I am heartbroken by my own sins? And in wrestling with those hidden sins, the Lord brought me into deeper fellowship with him, gave me a greater appreciation and love for his word, gave me a higher degree of patience towards those who I may disagree with. You see, when I looked upwards at God and then I looked downward at his word and then I looked inward at myself, I didn't like what I saw. But ultimately, it gave me a greater appreciation of God and his word. Friends, may I suggest to you this morning that many of the racial conflicts that we see happening in our society are a result of our hidden sins. The Scottish minister Robert Murray McShane, who died at my age during a pandemic, he said, the seed of every sin known to man is in my heart. Yet for some reason, it's easy for us to accept the fact that Jesus points out that we have the roots of adultery and murder in our hearts, but we don't struggle with racism. Well, could it be that it's hidden? Could it be that while we can recognize the horrificness of what happened to George Floyd, we're failing to recognize the sin that's in our heart that's hidden that enables racism to continue to exist in our society? Friends, may I humbly yet firmly tell you this morning that all of us, Black, white, Asian, Native American, Hispanic, whatever, all of us need to, before we start forming our thoughts and opinions about what's going on in the world around us, we need to fall humbly on our knees and humbly on our face and say, God, I know you created the heavens and the earth. I know your word tells us that you're perfect and that I'm far from it. But God, when I look upwards and then I look downwards at your word, I, like the tax collector in Luke, can't even look with my eyes up to heaven because I know how imperfect I am. Are we willing to pray that prayer and ask God to reveal to us the hidden sins in our heart and cleanse us from within? Because the good news is that he will. And David, knowing that he was not innocent, prays this amazing prayer to close out this psalm that should be all of our prayer in light of what we know that Jesus did for us in Psalm 19:14. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. What would our lives look like if this was all of our prayer? What would our world look like if this was all of our prayer? What would our church look like? I think it was John Wesley who said, give me 100 people who hate sin and love God, and I'll shake England for God. Well, there's way more than 100 people in this room right here, and there's way more watching online. But friends, if we want to see a racial healing come to this land, it's going to take dealing with what's hidden deep within all of our hearts.